It lays the predicate and the foundation for the development of a weather satellite that will permit man to determine the world's cloud layer and ultimately to control the weather, and he who controls the weather will control the world.
October hurricane forecast. Brace for the return of big hurricanes. That's a breaking report from USA Today. They continue. The 2024 Atlantic hurricane season entered its fifth month Tuesday, and experts are again taking stock of a deadly and puzzling season. They then say the year started with dire predictions of a hyperactive season, quickly followed by the explosive and record-breaking landfall of Hurricane Beryl early in July. Then came an odd mismatch in Pacific and Atlantic activity, a later mid-season lull. But now, they say, with Hurricane Helene's deadly and devastating rampage across the southeast last week, any hope of a quiet hurricane season for the U.S. has been obliterated. And there you have it, the new and updated scheduled weather. We'll soon enough see what's in store for those that may be in the path of what is now scheduled. Of course, as has been the case already this year, the script can be changed at any time. Welcome to Geoengineering. On that note, let's take a minute to listen to a revealing audio recording of a conversation on climate engineering with National Weather Service personnel and my appreciated friend, Mike Decker. Here it is.
National Weather Service?
Yes, sir. Are you located in Pueblo?
Yes, we are.
Hey, do you guys have a NEXRAD there?
Yes, we do. Well, not at our office, but we do have one.
Right. I was wondering why it's been blasting out in a wheel-style frequencies.
Yeah, we've been talking with our techs about that, and they're going to go out tomorrow and clean some parts and stuff and see if that takes care of the problem. But they're aware of it, and they're going to be working on it.
Well, the problem is we know these are being used for weather modification and such, and geoengineering. Are you guys aware of that?
Not that we're aware of here, so yeah.
So who actually runs those NEXRADs?
It's the Weather Service does.
Is that AI operated or manual?
It's manually.
It's manually.
I'll tell you what, I'll have you talk with our manager and go from there. How's that sound?
That's fine.
Alright. Hi, this is Charlie, the meteorologist in charge for the National Weather Service in Pueblo. How can I help you?
All right, Charlie. My name's Mike Decker. I'm up here in Wyoming. How are you today?
I'm doing great. What can I do for you, sir?
I got some questions about your NEXRAD that's putting out a lot of extremely low frequencies right now in a wheel-type pattern.
Okay, yeah. We actually did have some interesting signatures, especially this morning. We can see you as Route 50 on our radar, and we also think we get possibly some clutter as well that we've been having our techs investigate. Is that what you're speaking of? That was northwest of our radar?
Yeah. And
Okay, well, we do have some technicians that are aware of the issue, and we are going to be working to get that removed because it's not precipitation, right?
well, I know it's not precipitation. I know these are used for geoengineering, weather modification, climate engineering, to move storms and such.
No, that is not correct.
That is correct. I'm very well educated in what these are used for, and I am an anti-geoengineering activist who's been watching the skies get trashed for many years, watched you use these radars.
Okay, well, the mission of the National Weather Service is we monitor the weather and we issue forecasts for southeastern Colorado. We have 21 counties in southeastern Colorado. We do a 7-day forecast and we issue watches and warnings for the area.
So,
I'm not sure what you're speaking about, like what that would have to do with our mission. That doesn't have to do with our mission.
yeah, it does, because these are being used to control the weather, and they have been for a long time. What do you think they're there for? It's not just to look for magical rain, and then your guy's trying to tell me it's bugs. I'm sorry. Don't BS me.
Okay, again, sir, we're here to provide watches, warnings, advisories, and a 7-day forecast.
Right, I get that.
And help keep the public safe. Like, we're here because we want to keep people just like you
Well, what you're doing with these extremely low frequencies that are blasting clear up into Wyoming, Nebraska, a little bit in South Dakota, clear down New Mexico. I'm watching it right now live. I'm watching it. This is all being recorded.
Okay.
So have you ever heard of geoengineering?
That is not something that we work on here at the National Weather Service.
I didn't ask if you work on it there. I just asked have you ever heard of it.
Okay. Basically, our public line is to provide information about what the forecast is, what kind of weather hazards could be coming up in the next 7 days. Like, we're here to provide you with that kind of information. However, I can direct you to our public affairs contact at the National Weather Service headquarters, and they can assist you with that.
No, I don't need to talk to them. I'm talking to you. Have you ever heard of geoengineering? Do you see geoengineering going on over Colorado?
That's not part of our mission here.
Well, it should be, considering it's all about the weather, right? Are you aware of the aluminum, barium, strontium, graphene, and hundreds of other things that are being sprayed in our skies that these radars use to move storms and such around, to dry people out, to flood people out, to cause a lot of damage, kind of like out in the southeast right now? You don't...
Okay, that's not part of our mission here at the National Weather Service.
Yeah.
That's not what we do here.
Are you a government agency?
We're a federal agency.
Okay.
That's correct.
Well, then you work for me, don't you? You work for the people.
Question. Did it seem to anyone else that these National Weather Service personnel were being completely evasive and clearly knew much more than they were willing to say? Question 2. Could the illegal federal gag order that's been placed on all National Weather Service and all National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration personnel, the nation's weathermen, be the core factor regarding their evasiveness? You decide. Next. This new summary report is from sciencenews.org. How rapid intensification, a term we hear all the time now, spawned 2 monster hurricanes in 1 week. The report states warm waters supercharged Hurricane Helene. Was that the only factor? In the Gulf of Mexico, and Hurricane John in the Eastern Pacific, which hit Acapulco again, by the way. Helene, like so many hurricanes in recent years, seemed to spin up, they say, out of nowhere. Just 3 days earlier, it was a disorganized cluster of thunderstorms off the eastern coast of Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, a mere tropical disturbance. Yes, the so-called rapid intensification, the new term for the new norm. I'm sure it's just a coincidence that these storms are being kept in a somewhat disorganized state until close enough to be maneuvered by the extensive ground-based NEXRAD frequency transmission installations. And isn't it interesting? We don't see any rapid intensification near the oil production facilities, do we? Just another coincidence, I'm sure. From Salon.com, the Hurricane Helene devastation in Asheville confirms we can't hide from climate change. They say the North Carolina city was supposed to be a climate refuge. Experts say nowhere can escape our global crisis. Yes, you can't hide from what's happening in our skies. That's exactly true. Hurricane Helene unleashed some 42 trillion gallons of rain on the U.S. Southeast, the equivalent of nearly 2 years of full flow over Niagara Falls. Here's more on the havoc Hurricane Helene wrought on so many regions. From RFD TV, Hurricane Helene could trigger $7 billion in crop insurance payouts. From WUSF, agricultural losses from Hurricane Helene continue to mount in North Florida. From WUFT.org, worse than Idalia, Florida peanut farmers report devastating losses from Hurricane Helene. From the InsuranceJournal.com, hurricane ravages southern cotton crops just before harvest. From CBS News, North Carolina expects major crop losses. But it's not just about crops, is it? There's much more to the story. New from mining.com, Hurricane Helene halts quartz mines needed for chip making. The report states the halt in operations could affect global supply chains that depend on semiconductors to make phones, solar panels, and other technologies. And let's cover this previous report from NorthCarolinaNewsline.com, possibly one of the bigger pieces in this puzzle. Piedmont Lithium gets cold shoulder in Gaston County, North Carolina. The report states the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality is reviewing Piedmont Lithium's permit applications. However, without Gaston County's rezoning approval, it will be difficult for the company to proceed. Piedmont Lithium continues to lose money, recording a $125 million deficit as of June 30th, and expects to operate in the red until commercial production is achieved. Let's add this next from mining.com as well. Piedmont Lithium pulls U.S. government loan application. That's September 5th, 2024. Piedmont Lithium has pulled its application for a debt package from a popular U.S. government loan program and is scaling back ambitious expansion plans. So let's summarize this. Uncooperative landowners, massive financial hemorrhaging by Piedmont Lithium, dropping a government loan package, scaling back production, and then, well, you know the rest. Hurricane Helene was also utilized as an atmospheric moisture pump. Copious quantities of atmospheric moisture are essential for the climate engineers to be able to carry out chemical ice nucleation cloud seeding, which in turn can and does create a short-term toxic surface cool down as the chemically nucleated cold, dense air sinks to the surface. So while the majority of the U.S. continues to bake and burn into October, and most of the rest of the world the same, the most populated portions of the U.S., the East and the Northeast especially, get yet another round of chemical cooling, keeping the division and confusion going in regard to the true severity of unfolding planetary meltdown. All a part of the plan? You decide. But before you do, let's add this. New from MediaMatters.org. Conspiracy theories about Hurricane Helene are going viral on TikTok by Olivia Little, senior investigative researcher for MediaMatters.org. Keep that in mind. From the Olivia Little report, this: the most prominent conspiracy theory circulating on TikTok about Hurricane Helene claims that the storm was not a natural occurrence, but engineered in order to devastate North Carolina and create access to the land for lithium mining. Can I say what I find is suspicious as SHIT, said one user in a video with over 1.8 million views. That one of the areas affected by Hurricane Helene is the world's largest lithium deposit, and the DoD, Department of Defense, just entered into an agreement with this company right here to mine lithium for electric cars starting in 2025, and now that area is completely devastated, end quote. That's again all part of the report from Olivia Little. Little then says this in her report, quote, the absurd lithium claim is also spreading off of TikTok, including among prominent right-wing conspiracy theorists like Stu Peters. For the record, I salute Stu for taking the gloves off and trying to pull the curtain back. I did an interview with Stu this week, and we covered this issue. Take a look at my exchange with Stu and then decide for yourself if the Hurricane Helene events and the potential motives behind them were just conspiracy theory, or if the so-called investigative report from Olivia Little is a desperate attempt at a conspiracy cover-up. Again, you decide. Olivia Little finishes with this. Conspiracy theories tend to spike after natural disasters. Are they natural? And she continues with this, and Helene is no exception. TikTok's algorithm seems to be helping spread them, fueling panic and uncertainty among users. Who wouldn't be panicked and uncertain at the potential ramifications of what's going on all over the world? Any rational person would be. This is Dane Wigington. You're listening to the weekly installment of the commercial-free, non-political Global Alert News Report, the End of the World as We Know It broadcast, brought to you by Geoengineeringwatch.org, the largest and most visited website in the world on the subject of global climate intervention operations, aka weather warfare. Reaching a critical mass of awareness is the only way forward in this fight. We can and we absolutely must reach a critical mass by starting a conversation on climate engineering that leads people to a credible source of data. Geoengineeringwatch.org will continue all of our efforts to be the go-to source on covert climate engineering operations. A conversation on climate engineering can easily be started with Geoengineering Watch awareness-raising printed materials available on our homepage. We distribute these printed materials for less than our cost of producing and shipping. Please help us to sound the alarm. Before diving into breaking reports on Earth's collapsing life support systems, here's one more on the Matrix media attempts to marginalize anyone that dares to mention the shockingly obvious atrocities taking place in our skies. Here's a new nugget from CBC Canada. Office of Alberta Premier Smith responds to her comment about chemtrails. Again, it's very important to use the science terms, so we wouldn't give the media the ability to so easily marginalize this issue. Smith spoke about chemtrails at the United Conservative Party town hall in Edmonton. Smith said, if the U.S. is hitting Alberta with chemtrails, her hands are somewhat tied as a regional leader in Canada. She said, I have some limitations in what I can do in my job. I don't know that I would have much power if that is the case, if the U.S. Department of Defense is spraying us, end quote. The CBC report continues. Experts, so-called experts, including health law professor Timothy Caulfield, have dismissed it as a baseless conspiracy theory. Caulfield with the University of Alberta said Smith is doing the public a disservice. Timothy Caulfield then continues with this. In this age of misinformation, in this age where conspiracy theories are having a detrimental impact on democracies around the world, it's just horrifying, Caulfield states, to see a political leader not simply and explicitly correct the conspiracy theory, end quote. Again, that's from Timothy Caulfield, University, Alberta. Perhaps he should get a link to the dimming. What do you think? Eyes wide shut and head somewhere it doesn't belong. How many are going about their lives as if Walmart's shelves will always be stocked with bargain foods, processed and chemically contaminated though they may be? How about self-proclaimed preppers who are still trying to convince themselves that stockpiles of guns and ammunition is the answer, or stashes of shiny metal coins that the starving will soon enough be willing to trade for a can of beans? So often from so many I hear clamoring about the fight for democracy and liberty, both of which have long since been an illusion used very successfully to occupy the majority of the masses in perpetual conflict. But how many are focused on sounding the alarm about the fact that we will all very soon be neck deep in a real-time, right now fight for life on a rapidly dying planet with a clinically insane predator-parasite class at the wheel and an epidemic of eyes wide shut denial and apathy within the ranks of populations? What is coming, indeed, what's already unfolding, won't seem real to the vast majority until it is, and it's about to be. Wait and see. No matter how glaring, verifiable, and factually inarguable unpleasant and unwanted truths are, the majority continue to resort to knee-jerk, programmed, unconscious denial. This must change, or we have no chance. Back to the overall biosphere burndown, there are no orchestrated deluges in the Amazon, only drought, dry rivers, and flames. This update on what's left of the Amazon. Brazil's paradise on fire. The forest is burning. Animals are burning. Everything is burning. That's the headline. That's from the UK Guardian. This year's drought, which authorities have called the most intense and widespread in Brazil's history, has brought misery to those who live along major Amazonian waterways. The destruction of crops in the Amazon is expected to result in higher market prices due to their scarcity. Just the beginning. More on the Amazon in a moment. It gets much worse. New from Time.com, aka Time Magazine. Planet Earth is in critical condition. These are the steps the world must take to change that. Steps like so-called renewable energy, which isn't, and the masses are led to believe that with magical new forms of so-called renewable energy and technologies, we, the human race, will be able to loot, plunder, pillage, and pollute the planet forever. Ever more massive cruise ships to take us on voyages across dead oceans, larger theme parks, more sports events, new and improved iPhones, and even bigger widescreen TVs. We definitely need to have those, don't we? So far, for those that are still buying into the lie that so-called renewable energy sources will keep the carnival of planetary destruction going forever, take the time to view the documentary Planet of the Humans. And as I've previously stated, at the 40-minute mark of the film, where it shows a desolate, blowing expanse of sand in the middle of the Mojave Desert, where the first commercial solar plant of its kind once stood, but is now completely gone, I worked on the construction of this facility in 1984. It's gone, completely gone, because it wasn't viable in the first place. Again, planet of the humans. Watch it, consider it. On a final note of clarification for the record, is my just criticism of so-called renewable energy somehow an endorsement for carbon fuels and the carbon fuel carnival of planetary destruction? Short answer, no. Every puzzle piece I've just outlined are pounding the final nails into our collective coffins. Every single form of human activity that alters the energy balance of the planet, the former energy balance, which has been completely obliterated, is a part of the problem. It's not a this or that equation. It's a this and that equation. We can't live like this and expect to survive for much longer. Don't believe it? I understand. Who'd want to? But reality is what it is, and it's about to hit us all head on. And even though alternative energy sources are better than straight-up incineration of carbon fuels, climate engineering is totally disrupting all three primary alternative energy sources. Now, finally, official confirmation of what Geoengineering Watch has stated on the record for a decade and a half. New from carbonbrief.com, how solar geoengineering could disrupt wind and solar power. Could, may, might, and it's not just wind and solar, it's also hydro. The report states our results indicate that the potential for solar energy would be reduced in almost all parts of the world if solar radiation management or stratospheric aerosol injection is used. They say using stratospheric aerosol injection enhances the frequency of extended periods with low solar potential. Does it take a team of scientists to figure out that when you intentionally put light scattering particles in the sky, that will affect solar power? Does it really take a rocket scientist to figure that one out? They say the changes in wind potential under SAI are caused by changes in large-scale atmospheric circulation. It's altering convection, which alters surface wind speeds. We now have all or nothing wind speeds. When you double the optimal wind speed for a turbine, you get no power because you have to turn the turbine off to keep it from blowing apart. When you cut the wind speed in half, you make 1/8 of the rated power output for that turbine. Climate engineering affecting all of this. They continued with a reduced potential for wind and solar when using SAI. There is a risk that deploying SAI would actually lead to a slowing of decarbonization. How does that fit? Actually negatively affecting the so-called net zero goal. For the record, this report left out, again, any mention of geoengineering's devastating impact on hydropower generation. Engineered droughts have devastated hydropower production in countless regions around the world. The ranks of so-called academia, aka the so-called experts, have a very particular kind of mental deficiency, aka mental retardation, the power structure programmed kind. Let's keep going. From CNN, scientists are sounding the alarm about oceans, but Biden's budget would slash research data. No surprise there. The report says, as scientists scramble to understand why the world's oceans are in their second year of record-breaking heat, is that, again, so hard to understand when all of industrialized militarized civilization is a heat engine by its very nature. Now let's add climate engineering that's trapping more heat than it deflects, destroying the ozone layer, disrupting the hydrological cycle, and contaminating everything. Gee, I wonder what could go wrong. This report then says, one of the most important programs to gather ocean data in the U.S. is in danger of going dark and cutting off research at a critical time for the planet. Yeah, the time when we're circling the drain. Despite President Joe Biden's ambitious climate goals, his recent budget proposal would slash the program funding from $42.5 million to $10 million. That cut means more than 75% is far steeper than cuts proposed during even the Trump administration. The report continues, unless Congress adds more money, that level of funding would devastate the program. Researchers say not only would new instruments not be added, but buoys that have been measuring data for years would literally get pulled out of the water. Essentially, the report says we would have to go dark. This is not an accident. This is how you sweep things under the rug. This is why U.S. water quality testing in many states stopped testing for aluminum in 2002. You can't find what you're not looking for, can you? You can't measure the speed of planetary meltdown when you eliminate any form of monitoring. It's not an accident. It's all the same. Both sides of the same coin, the same core of power and control, and people still pretending elections mean anything. They're not elections, they're selections. All scripted theater to distract populations until the brutal, bitter end, until the moment of impact. New from the UK Guardian, grim new death records as brutal heat plagues U.S. Southwest into the autumn. They say September has offered little reprieve after sweltering summer with Las Vegas on 102nd day of temperatures above 100 degrees Fahrenheit. This is the case for so many regions, and this is even with an underreporting of official high temperatures. Not overreporting, but underreporting. We know that because we're checking. From the Seattle Times, California heat wave smashes records, but the worst is still to come. And they would know, wouldn't they? Because that's what the current scheduled weather is. Keep that high-pressure dome parked over the U.S. West until we're completely incinerated. And that's how they're steering the upper-level wind currents, diverting moisture and chemically nucleated cool air clockwise around that high-pressure dome and back down onto the East Coast, where they keep the most populated portions of the U.S. cooler at the expense of frying the West. Record-shattering heat and drought in the U.S. West is being systematically ignored and denied by most matrix media sources. The only very short breaks in the scorching temperatures and off-the-charts UV radiation comes when a bit of heavily seeded moisture is allowed over the West. The climate engineers saturate the moisture with patented processes of chemical ice nucleation and cloud seeding. A short-term toxic surface cool-down is the result, along with drying up much or most of the moisture that would have otherwise fallen as rain. And this result is directly linked to the chemical ice nucleation cloud seeding process because of the endothermic reaction this process creates. From MSN, in France, climate is collapsing. Millions of lives threatened. That's the headline. The report states a rather frightening report has just been published by the Climate Action Network in collaboration with the Agency for Ecological Transition. It describes region by region the major consequences of global warming in France. No mention of climate engineering operations, no surprise. From phys.org, plain contrails, white fluffy contributors to global warming. How many years have I stated that? Short-term toxic cooldowns at the cost of an even worsened overall warming. And by the way, the plain contrails don't create white, fluffy clouds. They create filthy, dingy, dirty, toxic aerosol clouds. The report then states the white feathery lines behind airplanes that look like bits of harmless cloud are anything but, experts warn, who say they could have a greater environmental impact than the aviation sector's CO2 emissions. That's a gross understatement. The dispersal of tens of millions of tons of not jet exhaust, but sprayed dispersions, tens of millions of tons of nanoparticles around the globe. And we came up with that figure from hundreds of lab tests working with the University of Minnesota and extrapolating what a global dispersion likely is. 40 to 60 million tons of toxic heavy metal, polymer, and graphene nanoparticles. And what else might be in this mix, we can't know. You can't just take a sample to a lab and ask them to tell you what's in it. You have to tell them what to look for. That's how it works. And about CO2, listen carefully to this next headline that makes no sense whatsoever from KOIN.com. Listen carefully and try to make sense of this. Earth's carbon levels plummet as October arrives in the northern hemisphere. Add this. You'll understand what I'm getting at. NASA and NOAA climatologists explain that the Earth's breathing pattern as an annual rise and fall of CO2 levels caused by seasonal cycles in photosynthesis on a massive scale. In the northern hemisphere, spring plants come to life and draw in CO2 to fuel their growth. This begins the process of lowering the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere. In northern autumn, plant growth stops or slows down, and the whole process reverses itself, aka they release CO2. Much of the plant matter decomposes, releasing CO2 back into the atmosphere, which they just acknowledge what I said. So, they say, fall is not only a great time to enjoy the cooler temperatures and fall colors, but also to breathe some clean air. Cleanest of the year, they say. How does that make sense? Answer: it doesn't. Here's one more report on bad air, and yet again, the so-called experts have no clue. From OregonLive.com, strange odor in southwest Washington definitely wasn't from Mount St. Helens, scientists say. The sharp, toxic seeming odor that residents throughout the southwest Washington and Oregon smelled on September 22nd and 23rd remains a mystery. Hydrogen sulfide that is likely drifting in from methane hydrate and clathrate deposits that are releasing on the seabed due to the rapidly warming oceans. This is heavier than air, and it floats in, and this is not a new occurrence. And yet, every time it occurs, the scientists have no clue. It remains a mystery, they say. Question: could the cluelessness of the experts be because hydrogen sulfide is highly toxic and they don't want to panic the herd? Could that be why? It's, quote, a mystery. From Vox.com, are we understanding global warming? Question mark. They say, why climate scientists are so concerned about aerosols, the stuff that is sprayed in our skies, not just greenhouse gases. Last year, the report says, was the hottest year on record, and this year's temperatures may reach even higher. They will. Previous sensitivity estimates have vastly underestimated the role of aerosols, the unacknowledged elephant in the sky, such as soot and dust, they say. And I'll mention climate engineering aerosols since the Vox.com report never will. The report continues, because of the aerosols, there may be more warming baked in than we, the so-called experts, realized. These fine particles suspended in the sky can have a myriad of effects on the global climate. You think? Really? What could go wrong with spraying our skies with tens of millions of tons of toxic elements, destroying the ozone layer, again, contaminating everything, disrupting the hydrological cycle, every breath we take, toxic. If the world does go down one or more of the extreme warming scenarios, Vox says, curbing greenhouse gas emissions may not be enough to keep the planet livable for humans. We could be forced to employ more extreme and controversial interventions like geoengineering to rein in runaway warming. Really, we could be forced to utilize extreme and controversial interventions like geoengineering to rein in global warming, end quote. How's that going so far? As the planet spirals into total meltdown, climate engineering is weather and biological warfare, period. All those in academia, media, and government, anything that continue to participate actively or passively in the criminal cover-up of climate engineering should be, must be, held legally and morally accountable by a justifiably enraged population. And I live for that day, the proverbial pitchforks and torches moment. And never forget this, climate engineering and the other recent forms of covert warfare that have been and are being perpetrated on populations are all coming from the same cancerous core of power. That includes conflict and carnage zones. More breaking news. Remember, the climate engineers control the spigot, not just deadly deluge, but also devastating drought and the firestorms that go with it. On that note from the UK Guardian, the Earth is crying out for help as fires decimate South America. Smoke shrouds its skies. The Amazon is done, along with the Great Barrier Reef. And even now, how many are still clinging to blind beliefs of one or another political puppet, saving them from unfolding and accelerating planetary omnicide? Only we can do that. But the effort will take all of us. From France 24, Brazilians choke as fire smoke blankets 80% of country. From multiple sources, forest fires engulf the entire Amazon basin. From that report, forest fires have consumed millions of hectares in the Amazon basin this year alone, due to global warming, they say. No mention of climate intervention operations, which are the single greatest hydrological cycle disrupting factor of all, period. Please search the engineering drought section on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. Search the engineering wildfire section. And as we head into the next nucleated winter, chemically nucleated, please search the engineering winter section. Understand this issue and its complexity. It is not a simple issue. Oxfam warns that if preventative measures are not taken to curb climate change's negative effects, aka climate engineering as well, survival of Earth's animal species, including humans, is gravely in doubt. That's reality. That's not some fringe speculation. The statistical trajectory right now indicates that short of a complete course correction, there may be no one here by the end of this decade, and that seems impossible to people because everything's chugging along at the moment. Record high stock market, which is the epitome of a red flag of things about to collapse, and people pretending that it doesn't matter how completely destroyed the planet is, as long as the market's up, everything must be fine. What a planetary Truman Show it all is. Even the world's largest rainforest is completely incinerating, and how many sources are still not only omitting any mention of covert weather warfare operations, but also spewing out their mind-numbingly moronic mantras of, quote, global cooling and coming ice age, exactly as the powers that be and the carbon fuel industry want them to recite. Almost forgot. The climate alarmism term. What exactly does that mean? That we shouldn't be alarmed about the fact that our planet and climate are so badly damaged right now in real time that, statistically speaking, again on the current course, few if any will make the end of this decade. And that's without the additional factor of nuclear everything, war and power plant meltdowns. And I shouldn't be alarmed about that? Really? Global insect populations have already collapsed 80 to 90%, terrestrial and aquatic. Global wildlife populations the same, conservatively down 70% in the last 40 years alone, which were already a reduced population. Global pelagic fish populations, the food fish down 90% and crashing by the day. Forests are dying, oceans are dying, the ozone layer is collapsing. Mad Max scenarios are already unfolding and accelerating in dozens of countries around the world. And above it all, the highly toxic weather warfare rages on, and yet the quote climate alarmism term is spewed out from so many that are clearly either completely clueless or lying. Take your pick. But wait, many would say global powers are pushing climate change. Yes, true, but only to a point. They are not in any way disclosing that what is actually unfolding is an abrupt climate collapse scenario, further fueled by climate engineering weather warfare operations. So when the power structure orchestrates one demographic to completely deny any damage to the climate, except in some cases an acknowledgement of climate engineering, and the other side is programmed to acknowledge anthropogenic damage to the climate only, but to completely ignore anyone that brings up the subject of climate engineering due to the moronic mantras of global cooling and coming ice age just mentioned. Then, from the viewpoint of the controllers, mission accomplished, wedge driven into society. If we're to have any chance of moving forward in the fight to expose and halt climate engineering, we must stand on credible common ground, and here it is. What can't be argued, that there can be no legitimate discussion of climate anything from any perspective without first and foremost acknowledging and addressing the ongoing climate engineering elephant in the equation, period. You're listening to the weekly installment of Global Alert News, the Bad News Broadcast, installment number 478, October 5th, 2024. This is Dane Wigington, your host. Global Alert News is brought to you by Geoengineeringwatch.org, the largest and most visited website in the world on the subject of climate intervention operations known as geoengineering. Recordings of the commercial-free, non-political Global Alert News Hour can be found on the homepage of Geoengineeringwatch.org under the recent column and on the Dane Wigington YouTube channel. I want to express my deepest gratitude to all of those that have stood with me in this long and arduous battle. Team effort. If you're on our email list, please put us on your email contact book so that our mailouts don't go to the spam files. Please help us to share the groundbreaking documentary The Dimming, which fully exposes the climate engineering atrocities and provides proof of the same. Now worth over 25 million views on YouTube. The best way to share is by circulating the direct link to The Dimming by email directly from the homepage of Geoengineeringwatch.org. Sharing directly helps us to overcome social media censorship. When viewing our YouTube of The Dimming or Global Alert News or any other Geoengineering Watch video on YouTube, please subscribe, share, and comment, all of which helps us to circulate critically important data to a much wider audience. About reaching those that still aren't looking up, start a conversation with Geoengineering Watch awareness-raising materials, which can be found on our homepage. Our only goal, to provide activists what they need to move this fight forward. Extremely high-quality printed materials with shocking images. A picture is worth 1,000 words, as the proverb goes. We pass on these printed materials again for less than our cost of producing and shipping. Our only goal, my only goal, to stop this insanity in our skies. We also have Geoengineering Watch hoodies and shirts. Photos of both are on our homepage. We have scannable business cards, bumper stickers, all effective tools to help strike up a conversation on the climate engineering issue. Reaching a critical mass of awareness on the climate engineering onslaught is the great imperative of our time. If we can expose it, we have a chance of stopping it from the inside out. We must awaken our military brothers and sisters and their families to what they're participating in, their own demise and ours. If you're willing to share a picture of yourself with a Geoengineering Watch t-shirt or hoodie, ideally in some crowded location, please send your photo to us so we can post it as part of our activist compilation, which is part of our materials page. The images encourage others to make their voices heard in this all-important battle to sound the alarm. And to all those that are standing steadfastly in this battle, you have my deepest gratitude, now and forever. It is our collective efforts that can yet make a difference at this late hour. From the UK Daily Mail, experts warn store prices will soar and shelves will be empty as greedy dock workers strike over 80% pay raise. Is that all there is to this equation? It sounds like an extremely one-sided story to me. There is so much more to this. The planet's life support systems are imploding. From crops to fisheries, empty store shelves are coming, period. And power structure orchestration always tries to find some other scapegoat to pin it on, so the population doesn't panic with the realization that the party is over. Because at that moment, the party really is over. It shatters, and we are so close to that point. Planetary meltdown, core to the equation. Climate engineering, core factor to the planetary meltdown. But not the only factor, so please don't misquote me. The equation we face is not a this or that equation, it's a this and that equation. Any human activity that affects the energy balance of the planet is a part of the problem. Please remember that. And the mantra that builds bridges. No legitimate discussion about climate anything from any perspective without first and foremost addressing climate engineering. From azfamily.com, hottest September temperature ever recorded in Phoenix. The Phoenix area recorded a high temperature of 117 degrees. That is by far the latest ever 117 degree temperature recorded during a calendar year. It smashed the previous daily high of 108 in 1992. That's almost 10 degrees warmer. They continue. It's the hottest September temperature ever recorded for Phoenix. We think the record setting will continue for another week. Today was the fourth straight day Phoenix set a record high. It's entirely possible that the streak could last until next weekend with 10 or 11 straight days with record highs. Does anyone see a trend here? And keep that in mind while I get to some things I'm going to get to in a moment. Chinese CGTN, that's China Global Television Network. Just for the record, they cover global environmental devastation 100 times more credibly than U.S. matrix media. How can that be, many would ask? It is. Look for yourself. On that note, Nepal ravaged by deadly floods and landslides, 66 dead, 69 missing. That's one example of what CGTN covered. U.S. media didn't say a word. From Copernicus.eu, as of September 2024, 9 provinces in Cambodia have been affected by severe flooding, which has damaged thousands of homes. No word from U.S. matrix media. Next, I want to take a moment to address a photocopy of the NRA magazine sent to me by a friend who was as outraged as I am at seeing this. Full page, NRA magazine, global warming hoax. Every American must know, they say, how decades of dubious scientific data could restrict their freedoms. So we're talking about global warming or freedoms. And this report then talks about the global warming, one of the most hotly debated issues throughout the world, not really debated by anybody credible. Plus, you'll see how you may have been misled about climate change by government officials. It goes on and on. Where are there facts? There are none. But how many want to believe this? Because we all love to hate Al Gore, and he is a criminal hypocrite, I agree, as are all the major environmental groups. But how does that change reality? Anybody that looks at the global picture can clearly see the planet's in total meltdown, except for the engineered winter weather whiplash scenarios with chemical ice nucleation cloud seeding that creates baseball and softball size hail, or creates conditions that go from 85-degree record high temperatures in Denver, Colorado, for example, to single digits in a day. That's not nature. That's climate engineering. So why is Geoengineering.org the only organization that is trying to disclose the engineering winter aspect of climate engineering? Why is that? Because that aspect doesn't fit into the ideology or the narrative? We need to stand on facts, not ideology. Please search the engineering winter section on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org, and whatever planet global cooling and coming ice age is taking place on, it isn't this one. On that note, here's some records. Warmest September on record, 2024. Minneapolis, Minnesota was almost 7 degrees. This is for the entire month. 7 degrees above normal. A whole month. Phoenix, Arizona, 5.2 degrees. Denver, Colorado, 5.2 degrees. Tucson, 3.8 degrees. It goes on and on. And these are the official temperatures that we see typically radically underreported. The actual on-the-ground temperatures are higher still. And all of this is from a baseline that's not even the pre-industrial baseline. They draw a line through the center of the graph with half of the warming below the graph, which cuts off half the warming, which completely skews the data. Total falsification across the board. We are far further into the curve of planetary implosion than almost any yet understand, but there won't be any hiding it for much longer. And on the subject of hiding it, and those so-called experts that are paid to do so, this headline. This is new from the UK Guardian. Elite US universities rake in millions from big oil donations. What a surprise. Student-led analysis raised concerns of conflict of interest at 6 universities, including Princeton, Columbia, Cornell, which is where Douglas McMartin serves. That's the so-called expert that we sued. Geoengineeringwatch.org sued Douglas McMartin. Please look it up. It made Bloomberg News. We're the only entity to sue anybody over the climate engineering atrocities. And that's one of the universities that's been getting funds from big oil. What a surprise. The Guardian report continues. Carbon fuel companies are hijacking our universities to perpetuate their own toxic industry. The 6 schools have together accepted over $100 million in carbon fuel industry-tied funding. Millions more in funding are coming from firms that, quote, enable the carbon fuel industry, such as banks that fund oil expansion or groups that have spread climate disinformation, which for the record includes climate engineering cover-up, a criminal cover-up. Keep all that in mind. The foxes are running the henhouse across the board. They control the narrative. Thus, they control public perception. But anyone who has eyes should be able to see the atrocities in our skies if they're willing. New from the UK Guardian. Why corn ethanol is worse for the climate than petrol. Is that any surprise? I think not. The so-called experts have long since known this, but they continue to protect their paychecks and pensions instead of the dying planet on which each and every one of our lives completely depends. All part of the same thread. Paid off universities, paid off scientists. On the subject of willful, blatant, criminal planetary destruction, the permanent kind, this followthemoney.eu report. Untold tons of toxic radioactive waste are being dumped into the North Sea. And let's not forget that 500,000 barrels of DDT our government has dumped off the coast of LA, which is just one of a total of 18 known toxic ocean dump sites in the same Eastern Pacific region. Sorry, I digress. Back to the Guardian report. The oil and gas industry has been using the basin, the North Sea, as a free disposal site for decades. Despite the accelerating climate crisis, controversial new drilling projects that will rely on free waste discharge into the ocean are still being approved. British chemicals conglomerate INEOS plans to discharge the pigging waste, is what they call it, production chemicals and contamination scraped from pipelines, which is acknowledged by industry experts to be dangerously radioactive. I'm just trying to make a point here. Our oceans are being used for a toxic waste dump. Our skies are being used as a toxic waste dump. Toxic coal fly ash appears to be, the chemical signature matches what's being dumped in our skies. It appears to be a base material, and we're all breathing it. Nanoparticles of countless toxic elements polluting everything from the sky to the ground, countless sources, and people going about their lives as if this is going to continue much longer, because it won't. Here's another example from imlive.com. We've never seen this before. High PFAS level found in Muskegon Lake foam. Remember the foam part. They say high concentrations of toxic PFAS chemicals found in the surface water from this summer on the Muskegon Lake have scientists scratching their heads. They can't figure it out. Again, although there are known legacy sources of PFAS in the Muskegon Lake, experts say the recent increase in shortline foaming is a new and unexplained scenario. Yes, another example from the so-called scientists of we just can't explain it, no idea, not a clue. Let's try this. What foams a lot and utilizes PFAS forever chemicals? Surfactants. What's named in climate engineering patents regarding materials dispersions? You guessed it, surfactants. Just a coincidence, I'm sure. How many have witnessed foaming rain runoff, extreme foam buildup in waterways and on ocean shores? Look up. What is dispersed into our skies must come down, and so it does. And when it does, we all get to breathe it, drink it, and eat it. I want to revisit the term overshoot. We should always consider and ponder that term and how it so completely applies to the near-term fate of the human race, along with the entire web of life. As I've previously stated, mathematically speaking, we should need at least 5 planet Earths to to keep the current paradigm going for any significant amount of time. And even then, it wouldn't be enough, given the current mentality and behavior of so many in the ranks of the human race. No amount of planet Earth would be enough. All would eventually be overcome and decimated by the collective insanity, a cancer of control and a active or passive cooperation from far too many. Unless or until our perception of what matters and what doesn't changes and evolves to a higher level of consciousness, we have no chance, none. So to those that are already awake and aware and doing their best to sound the alarm, you have my deepest gratitude. Let's ramp it up. Let's achieve the proverbial 100th monkey of awareness and awakening. Every single day counts. Here's an update on the polar meltdown from the American Geophysical Union. Arctic warming is driving Siberian wildfires, also fires all over the northern hemisphere. They say increased temperatures and drought are leading to more wildfires, and wildfire smoke aerosols can suppress precipitation. I went over some of that before. Drying out soils and further increasing fire risk. It's a feedback loop, feeds on itself. Climate engineering core to all of this. Please, please search the engineering wildfire section on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. And most specifically, the Wildfires Serve Geoengineering Agenda short report. Very important report. And about this, the mostly sunny or filtered sunshine forecasts from the script-reading so-called forecasters. And what do these terms mean? It means no natural clouds, only sprayed aerosol filth. And how would these so-called experts or forecasters know that this will occur on any given day unless they were reading a script? How would they know if there's going to be sprayed dispersions that day or not unless they had the script? How many think all the images of the polar skies of the opaque, featureless canopy is normal? It's not. It's solar radiation management that's been going on for decades, longer than most of us have been alive. That's where they started climate engineering operations over the polar regions. And how's it working out there? Here's one headline example from this week. Scientists expect environmental catastrophe after looking deep beneath Doomsday Glacier. That's the Thwaites Glacier. Researchers discovered that the pace with which the glacier is melting is way faster than the scientists expected. Everything worse than they thought. Isn't it exactly what geoengineeringwatch.org has stated for a decade and a half? It's not as bad as we're being told. It's way worse than we're being told because they're trying to hide it from the public until the last possible moment. And this headline, SciTech Daily, melting faster than ever. Greenland loses 610 gigatons of ice in one summer. Think about that. I'm often asked, what's my most pressing current concern based on all available data? My answer, short of the end of the road threat of nuclear everything, Earth's collapsing ozone layer is our most immediate threat, which actually makes climate intervention operations our most immediate threat, since these operations are by far the single greatest ozone-destroying factor. Why are so many still completely denying the devastating damage to Earth's life support systems while pretending to be awake and telling the truth? Objective thinking is all too often absent, missing, exchanged for groupthink ideology, exchanged for dichotomous this or that thinking. Unfortunately, reality is much more complicated. Doublethink means the power of holding two contradictory beliefs in one's mind simultaneously and accepting both of them. Doublethink is the ability to simultaneously believe and disbelieve in the same idea, or to believe in two contradictory ideas at once. Orwell presents doublethink as a tool of manipulation and control that blurs the lines between truth and fiction, freedom and slavery, strength and ignorance. What will it take to turn this tide? The self-destructive propensity of the human race seems to have no limit to it. And even now, manufacturing yet more weapons of mass destruction for military machines with the planet's last remaining resources and collapsing life support systems. What a great idea. How many are whistling through the graveyard, completely asleep at the wheel? A lie doesn't become truth. Wrong doesn't become right. And evil doesn't become good just because it's accepted by a majority. Timeless words of wisdom from Booker T. Washington. Polish your philosophy, exercise your faith, summon your courage, join us in the fight for all that matters most. This is the place of unshakable solace. We must prioritize the greatest and most immediate threat short of nuclear cataclysm, which is a threat that also must be faced if we can first stop the ship from sinking. And that threat is what's taking place in our skies, the systematic destruction of and ubiquitous contamination of the entire biosphere for purposes of power and control. Climate engineering, aka weather and biological warfare, must be exposed and halted. Short of this, all other causes and concerns become moot. We're all playing the grandest game of chess. Learn how to play well, effectively, and efficiently. Sharing credible data from a credible source is key. Check the activist suggestions link on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org for specific instructions on how you can help to move this fight forward. Please, make your voice heard. Make every day count. The sand in the hourglass is rapidly running out. Until next week, this is Dane Wigington from geoengineeringwatch.org.